Just for sport. Jimmy Young is a broadcast veteran. Once known for his sports reporting, in recent years he's switched his attention to cannabis via his company Cannabis Media and has continued to build a small army of reporters who contribute to his ever-popular weekly shows. Hello and welcome to the Lobsterpot podcast. I'm Dave Barton, and as you can see, this lovely background. Actually, this is the image that I won a competition with ICBC to win a ticket to next year's show with. So this is the social post, which you can check out in actual social media style on, I can't even remember what my Instagram handle is. It's like Thermidor WTF. But anyway, check out Thermidor. There's not many of us on there, but it's not about me today. Today, we have very special guests. We have Jimmy Young from Cannabis Media, the founder of Cannabis Media from Boston, Massachusetts. I got that right. How you doing, Jimmy? Good to see you.
I'm doing well, and I think in a lot of ways this is kind of a historic moment because, 250 years ago this weekend, the British are coming. The British are coming. The British are coming.
Yeah, we like that. We get
the American Revolution began, and I am in Boston where it did all begin. I mean, I'm literally probably about 20 minutes away from the Lexington, Massachusetts Green, where the first conflict happened. But I still love my friends from the UK. Yeah. I really do.
So I had nothing to do with it. I'm not that old, but it's all good. But anyway, this is good. We don't usually get other kind of podcast and media people, but you've been doing this a while, and the things. Tell us more about Cannabis Media and all the different stuff. I love the fact you kind of bring this newscaster sensibility to all of the kind of content that you're creating. It's pretty cool, and it's not something I've seen many people do. But again, tell us more, and I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Dave. No, don't ever shut up, because that means I don't have to talk as much, and that's a big thing, as you know, because you've been in that host chair, and I have too. It all started really in a 30-year career in sportscasting in America and New England, and when the pandemic hit, everybody went home and learned how to use Zoom. And I had to go to my office every day because the woman that I was living with at the time did not want me in the house when she too was an entrepreneur. And I do tend to boom, and I do tend to have a large, loud voice. So I certainly didn't blame her. And more importantly, I was paying rent in that office. So I went every day. There was no one else in the building except for me and one other person. And the best part of that story, going to the office, was that downstairs from the base at the first floor of the building I was in was a Chinese and Japanese. So it was Chinese food and sushi, and a bar, I might add. Okay, and needless to say, I was their favorite customer, and they would literally bring me my lunch every day when I needed it, and they couldn't have been any nicer. The Great Walk, and that's how it all started. And then I started to use Zoom as a news gathering tool and a content creative device. Mm-hmm. And I was a longtime talk show host in sports. So moving over to the cannabis world has been a fascinating journey since 2018, when I went to my first ever pro-cannabis event. It was a trade show in Boston called the New England Cannabis Convention. And I had no idea. I had never been to an advocacy event. I had never been to a celebration, like they have the Freedom Rally and the Hash Bash in Michigan and the New York Cannabis Parade, and in California they have another.
Yeah, all of the.
So it was really my first experience, and I walked in and I looked around and I went, holy mackerel, this is a big business. There are a lot of people in this industry right now. And that was 2018. And it was only 2 years after the Massachusetts residents voted in adult use, and the market opened in November of 2018. And so everything kind of came together there, and I've been doing it ever since. And a dear friend gave me advice when I turned, my 60s, and I knew I didn't have enough money to retire. Not that I ever want to retire, because I've never worked a day in my life, Dave. You understand?
I mean, I do. I know, when you stop, it's just the whole thing, isn't it? You got to enjoy what you do.
And that way you never have to work a day in your life. And I've always enjoyed talking to people.
Yeah. And
I've been a talk show host in various capacities since 1977. Wow. I'm dating myself a tad, but you know what? I look damn good for 67. That's what people tell me, and I'm going to wave that flag for as long as I can.
Can I keep that? Yep, absolutely.
So that's how it all kind of started, to be honest.
But what got you into cannabis at the start? Was it just you were reading lots about it and thinking, oh, this is happening on my doorstep and I'm not involved? Or what was it kind of took you to the convention in the first place?
I think I was enlightened. They asked me to do a podcast. I didn't even know what a podcast was. I said, what do you mean a podcast? He goes, it's an audio interview. And I said, so do I need my cassette recorder and a microphone? He goes, no, you don't need a cassette. They don't do cassette recorders anymore.
Right. Yeah.
He said, you use your phone, you get a little doohickey, and you get a wireless microphone, and you do your interviews. And I'm like, I could probably do that. I did. I tried. Now, at the beginning, it was just audio because to me, a podcast still is an MP3 file. It's an audio digital file. What we're doing, to me, is a talk show, is an interview. And, I'm old school. I grew up in newsrooms in the 70s in the United States. So when a friend said to me, do what you do best, I go, well, I've been in newsrooms my whole life. I'll just start a news show and I'll start doing news for the industry. And this was in 2018, really, right after the podcast. And it's kind of blossomed. And in my soul, I'm a teacher and a coach. And my vision was I'm going to build an army of multimedia journalists and podcast hosts who are documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition in our time, in our world. And I started to recruit people that would work with me for nothing, since I had no budget and I had very few sponsors. And that's how it all kind of started. And here we are with 20 correspondents, an average of 2,500 to 5,000 views a week for the 3 sections of the news that we put out on our YouTube channel. I hate all social media. I will not go on Instagram. I will not. We have a handle. It's at Pro Cannabis Media on Instagram, but I don't go on it. And I usually give the credentials to someone on my staff or whatever, and they go and they do whatever they do, because I just don't like the censorship that exists on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter to a point until you know who bought it. But I don't. Again, the elected officials of the United States of America opened up 2 Pandora's boxes. Okay. One was the Farm Bill in 2018 when they legalized the plant and didn't realize what they were doing because they're freaking idiots and they didn't do any due diligence on it. And the other was really when 15-second age delay here. And the other was, please tell me what the second half of the vision is to document it with these, and we produce this every week, and I fulfill my vision every week. That's how I feel, because I am a teacher and a coach, and that is the deal I make with anybody who wants to contribute a 2-minute report to answer the question, what was the most interesting thing that happened in the cannabis universe in your state, in your country this week? Yeah. And you don't have to play the role of news guy. Okay. You could just be yourself and tell me what happened. It won't be more than 2 minutes long, because that's all I want. Yep. And some of these people have embraced it. They cover the events. They go in with their camera, with their phones now, and they do tours of facilities. So it's really evolved into a nice little. You've seen it, so you know. Absolutely. I put it all together on Sundays, and it's about a 13-hour journey from the beginning to the end. And I have some people that aren't great communicators that work with me who tell me that they're going to report. And I write them into the show, and then of course they don't report. So there's always this adapt and improvise in anything that we do as content creators, and that's what I get to do, and that's how it has evolved now. Yeah. And the other part of this story is not only am I producing a national TV news style program every week, but I've been asked to co-host the National Cannabis Industry Association's resurrection of their podcast. Yeah, cool. That actually has its debut, and I don't know, we're not live, so this is on, we're recorded, right? Yeah. It actually will be debuting every Wednesday at 12 noon on the various 7 platforms that we put it out on when we do live stream our first iteration of the version of the news show. That comes out 11 a.m. Eastern time, American Eastern time on Mondays. And then this one will be Wednesdays at noon. So I have 2 national audiences and followings now that I never thought would happen, but here I am doing it again. So, and it's basically, I've gone from sports guy to weed guy, Dave. It's my career. That's my life. I mean, you're not the only one, I guess. Who's the a few people? Ricky Williams have gone from sports guy to a few other people. He was a Heisman Trophy winning American football player, before he went into the cannabis world, or at least came out of the cannabis
Yeah.
closet, as we like to say.
Yeah.
And I came out of my cannabis closet, just so you know, at age 14,
Okay.
when I couldn't hold my beer. You know, back in that day, it was 18, the drinking age in America.
Okay.
And I used to get sick on 3 beers.
Well,
And, you know, what we're doing with cannabis now is self-medicating.
yes.
Well, before we really recognized that alcohol was as dangerous as it truly is, you know, a lot of people like to drink it and use it and still do. It's part of our society. It's part of our world.
Very much so, too.
But
Yes.
we all had to learn what your limit is. Right? Is it you drink until you get sick? I mean, that's really what the journey is, right? When you self-medicate.
Yeah.
And you know, again, 3 beers. It took me until my 30s though to realize I was allergic to the hops that are in beer, which rips up my stomach, which is why I puked after 3 beers. And I turned to weed because it was like, well, you guys are all, you know, doing 5, 6, 7 beers and you're drunk, and I want to try to keep up with you guys.
Do you know, I don't get ill from beer, but I have a very similar kind of. I've tried to like it. I'm like the worst Englishman ever. I don't like tea and I don't like beer, or I don't like football. So it's kind of like, oh, but anyway, yeah. I mean, again, there are certain occasions where it's like, as you know, I'm out with my friends. I'll have a nice cold beer, it's great, or you know, have an Indian meal, a nice cold, you know, things like that. I'm like, okay, it's the occasion around it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But when it comes to like just trying to knock back pint after pint, I'm just like, do you know what? More than 3, literally, I'm done. But again, it's again, my cannabis use has gone sort of recreational to sort of medical, and then kind of like, well, actually it's therapeutic, like you were saying. All cannabis use really is therapeutic, whether we kind of think about it or not like that.
Right. A lot of people like to use the product to get stoned and to just be a vegetable. Okay. They wake and they bake. But look, I support the right to put whatever you want in your body. We don't have a lot of freedoms anymore because our elected officials dictate kind of where our freedoms are going.
Well,
and I've always been a bit of a rebel. Okay. Always have been. And but it's a medicine, and we are learning how to self-medicate. And what strain might work for you, Dave, to give you relaxation could be you know, somebody freaking out on it over anxiety when they smoke. I mean, it's a different reaction because every mammal that has an endocannabinoid system, you know, which controls the brain and the feelings and the emotions and the pain and all this stuff in our brains, does get a little jumbled when we use the product. And there's no doubt that, you know, our minds are using this product to do whatever we'd like them to do. There's 7 different effects. You could be, you know, energized. You could be relaxed. You could be anti-anxiety. You can even, you know, there's that focus. And that's really what a shock. I'm ADHD. Didn't realize that until I was in my 30s either. Right. However, it helped me hyper focus when I was a teenager. Because I knew I was under the influence of cannabis, you know, herb, you know, pot, grass, whatever we called it back then. But I was able to take copious notes. I was able to focus on what the teachers were saying, as opposed to just being there doing, it helped me. It helped me from the very beginning.
And this is back in high school sort of age.
No, it's 8th grade to 31, pretty much every night, every day. And then I took 10 years off when my son was born, and then started up again when I was 42, and I've been a daily ever since. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, again, this is the thing, isn't it? I've heard so many people talk about their own experiences, like, you know, I didn't realize it was helping me, but it did. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it kind of came into it from a recreational mindset, saying, yeah, I just want to kind of, you know, get out of my mind or whatever. But why are you doing that? That's the question, isn't it, when it comes down to it? And I think, again, we have a medical market here in the UK. We also have a strong kind of culture, you know, weed culture from the kind of illicit market. And the two kind of are starting to overlap a little bit, I think. But again, it stands to reason that, you know, most people, regardless of whether they're medicating for, you know, actual medicinal purposes or for the other is actually just as valid. So it is reducing anxiety. It is helping people with ADHD get that focus they need, you know. And it's almost, how do we, I suppose the issue is when we kind of look at it from a kind of regulatory perspective, you know, it's hard to kind of reconcile those two things, I think, for many different people.
Right. 100%. And I don't like the word recreational. It's adult use. It's adult use.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a medicine. And I've always used it medicinally, at least as I got mature. Okay. I would say between 14 and 30, it was fun. Okay. Let's just say, or to escape from, but it, you know, it has taken on more of a medicinal role in my life, with my horrific osteoarthritis that I suffer with since my 40s, since that was my last competitive football game. Yes, I call it, you could call it's not American football when I say it either.
Yeah.
It's soccer here in America, but you guys know it as football. I can certainly, and I think I shared with you, I have a huge English influence in my life because as a child, I was taught the game by English camp counselors.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And my dad had taken me to see Pelé play at Fenway Park in Boston in 1966. I was 9 years old. And pretty much after that, I just fell in love with it. I said, I can't believe those guys can kick the ball as far as they can. You know, that was the thing that stuck in my mind. And then I learned as a coach, because I was a youth soccer coach for 35 years.
Oh, cool.
And I have a license, and I've coached at every level that you can in America, except the professional level. I've coached at the town, travel, club, high school varsity, and state level.
Wow.
And and that was mostly in the 80s and 90s when I was much younger. And I could demonstrate, which I cannot do anymore, but I can certainly talk a good game. And I love watching the game. And I love the fact that the United States has English Premier League soccer on pretty much every weekend, in the mornings on Saturday and Sunday. And it's really become part of the culture here now.
Yeah, really? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
And people embrace the English League, which I think is great. You know, right here in my Boston area, the Fenway Sports Group, they own a club called Liverpool. I'm sure you've heard of them.
I think so. Yes.
There's a band that came out of there too.
Something
right?
Silly hair, all that.
Yeah. So it's part of it's really evolved, because when I was a kid, we never saw professional soccer. You couldn't see it. The only time you could see a decent level is when the local public television channel in Boston would cover the Harvard University soccer games, because it was in their backyard in Cambridge. And when that happened, we got to watch college soccer with a lot of imports from over the pond.
Okay. Well, we're doing something right. You know, I think we. But again, that's an interesting one. So again, if your career has, you know, for the most part been focused on sports and on cannabis, how do you find the two are sort of reconciled by most people? I mean, again, if you're kind of like, well, because again, I guess a lot of sport, I mean, I guess things are sort of changing now when you've got, like, we talk about high profile sports people who are coming out of the game and saying, hey, we start our own cannabis brand and things like that. I mean, again, we're sort of starting to see CBD probably more sponsored by, you know, high profile sports people over here. But the idea of having someone sort of, you know, say, hey, I'm a medical cannabis patient who was playing for like the Premier League, it'd be like, that's still a big WTF moment for a lot of people, I think.
Oh, really? Right. Yeah, because again, we go back to the image of the athlete in our modern society. You know, we put them up on pedestals and they're perfect beings, and they do nothing but practice and think about their sport and their skills during that time. We all have to understand that they're human too. And they suffer from the same stresses, perhaps even more than the normal peeps, because after all, they're performing athletic skills for our entertainment. And, you know, American football players give years off their lives to play that game. You know, this has all been proven now with the studies of the dead brains of the NFL players, and it's you know, but it is still my enjoyment to watch and see if I can find something that I've never seen before in an athletic contest. That's why I watch sports.
Yeah,
to see something I've never seen. And I think there was a great moment in America this past weekend with the Masters golf tournament when Rory McIlroy won his first Masters. It was tremendous drama, great production. I watched as much as I possibly could while still producing the news. And, you know, it's still big part of my life. And I make a lot of analogies going back to sports.
Yeah.
Because while I turn to the cannabis side, I'm turning to it from a medicinal standpoint.
Yes.
It's not for everybody. I've seen and I've heard so many stories. Cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life. That is not something that I espouse to. However, I will definitely say that it has played a major role in my life at the different stages in my life. And I'm not afraid to admit that. And I still live to 67. So I'm doing okay as far as I think.
This is it. No, but I think it's interesting that, again, the sort of stigma aspects. And again, when you talk about, American football and, brain damage, and again, I guess a lot of, pro wrestlers and boxers and things like that. And I guess rugby players here, again, there is that very much that, high impact kind of, and that is, the idea of concussions and, bruising.
Right.
And, cannabis does offer some respite for those sorts of symptoms, doesn't it? And I know that, again, I think a lot of, again, well, I don't want to say the main boxer's name, we should not be named because of various reasons. But again,
I'm glad you actually know that, because I will not allow Mr. Tyson on anything I do.
Well, again, he's a divisive figure, but also a convicted fellow.
He's a convicted rapist, Dave. I'm sorry, but that's who he is.
Okay? Well, indeed.
And I have a problem with men's violence against women anyway, and I'm not going to promote a product that I still use medicinally just because of his past as a boxer. Well, and he was a thug as a boxer too, by the way. I've always been a Muhammad Ali and George Foreman fan. May they both rest in may they both rest in peace.
Indeed, but I guess it's kind of, you can see how there is this need, and it's not just coming from cannabis companies. It's coming from the athletes that themselves, and sort of starting to realize this is transformative for a lot of people, including sports people. And I think that's an interesting. I don't think we're seeing it over here in the UK yet, to the same extent you are in the US.
Dave, they're given opioids for their pain. They get hooked on opioids, and then they have another product that they can try and use, i.e. cannabis, and it can have better effects on them than the opioids. And you got to understand, our pain neurotransmitters are right up in here in our brain. The brain can control your pain. I've been working with a holistic person for the last 2 years, and she's really helped me spin my brain a little bit. She believes that the brain can heal the body. I am not as dedicated a believer in that, because I've seen my x-rays and I've seen my MRIs, and I look at them and I'm like, this is a structural issue here. So to me, a structural issue needs to be taken care of through surgery. And it's Western medicine and Eastern medicine. And cannabis is right in the middle of it, if you think about it. And you mentioned the athletes. Those athletes, the Ricky Williams, the Paul Pierces, the Gary Paytons, the Calvin Johnsons, the Darren McCarty, who's a former NHL player, Olympians, are all involved, a lot of them, in the cannabis movement. It's that you mentioned CBD. I heard you mention it. That is the minor cannabinoid that has an anti-inflammatory component to it. But CBG is really become the chic minor cannabinoid, if you will, that's starting to make its way into the various strains that are out there. The CBN is the relaxing cannabinoid that helps people to sleep, and sleep is still a huge problem in America. I don't know if it's over there.
And again, this is one of the things, I suppose, when we look at medical cannabis, is you can't get a prescription for sleep, to my knowledge. But again, it's what most people report. Do you know what? I've slept so much better since I've had the prescription. And
exactly.
Now that's not the intent. It's a kind of fortuitous byproduct or whatever.
Right. And I try to draw the line. I don't consider it a drug. It's a plant medicine that God put on this earth to be used responsibly. Now, I don't know if God really got into the old judgment of the
but it's
but
been
it was here for a reason.
Yeah.
And it had medicinal qualities from the very beginning, because you can look back 5,000 years. It was used throughout history. And it's been vilified in the United States. Well, I don't know if you know the history, but I am very well aware of the history of it in America. And it has a lot to do with race and greed and the powerful white man that controls the money in our country and in our politics. And it is not something, and now that I've been enlightened to the history of it, it so makes sense about why the founders of the founders of American industry, Mr. DuPont, Mr. Hearst, Mr. Carnegie, Mr. Mellon, wanted to make sure they protected their money. So they wanted to keep the Mexican American and the Black American, segregated and in their place, and not have access to the capital that they were making for themselves. And then they put a racist in charge of the first Federal Narcotics Bureau in America, this guy Harry Anslinger, in 1930. And then I find out that he married Herbert Hoover, who was a president, his niece. So right. The act of nepotism and racism basically set up the prohibition of cannabis with the Tax Act in 1937.
And it's get his paper rather than hemp. Yeah.
Right. And it's funny. It's not funny. It's sad, really. In the recent hearing in the United States Congress for the hemp world, one of the senators had a sign behind him that had a picture of rope. This is what we thought we were getting. Yeah. And then a picture of all the hemp edibles that gets high on the other side. And this is what we got. And I love it when I saw it, because I'm like, what you're admitting to, Mr. Senator, is you did not do your due diligence or research enough on this product, really understand the role it's played in our history and why it was vilified, the role race has played in it. And it's so enlightening to me when I found out all this stuff. And I'm like, this makes so much sense to me now. Why is it that the inner cities in America are filled with people of color, and the white man in the suburbs wants to make sure it stays that way? I mean, it's horrible. It's systematic, and it's horrible. And I hate injustice. Same reason why I hate Instagram and censorship. If we are truly a free world, we should not be doing that. Especially with a plant that's really been put on this earth as a medicine. To me, a drug is what I take every morning. The prescription ones that my PCP that went to all the great medical schools and wrote, prescriptions for my what a shock, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, ADHD. I mean, take your pick. There's a whole bunch of them in there. And I've certainly sprinkled in some Eastern stuff too.
This is the thing. And this is, again, comes back to how can one plant be almost kind of like on one end, it's helping children with almost, rare forms of epilepsy, just completely eradicate their seizures, and it can still be good to have among friends on a Friday, Saturday night. Right. That disparity is just hard for people to reconcile, because but for me, I always think of it as, there's use, like you say, it's been put on this earth. It's not good or bad. It's just what it is.
Right.
Use, and there's abuse, and, anything can be abused, anything, you know what I mean? And it's the extent to which something is exploited in whatever reason, or used to whatever effect. And when you boil down to, I think with a lot of cannabis, people, it's almost like people take the smell, the scent, the appearance of a joint, that's automatically, to a lot of people, that's a crime in progress. It's not, that's someone who is a patient who needs their medicine, who needs to go through this in order to relax, in order to, to focus, in order to reduce their pain, right. All of this, these are the sort of, I guess these are the sort of dichotomies we're kind of dealing with. You've got one hand, it says this, but hang on, how is that the same thing? And it's hard to get their head around.
If you know human behavior, the breaking the law, doing something unlawful, if you will, a lot of people think that should keep you from doing anything bad for you. But when that is a good thing, okay, how is it bad then? I mean, it's just bizarre. And I've asked a great doctor who I would absolutely introduce you to. I think he's a great interview. His dad is a legend in this industry. Dr. Peter Grinspoon is his name. His dad was Lester Grinspoon, who wrote Marijuana Reconsidered in 1969 at Harvard University. And Harvard's in the news here in America again.
Yes, I've been reading about some funding. We don't. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. But
no. I'm not getting into. I hate. I think the non-politically correct direction that my country is going. Let's just leave it at that. How's that?
Yes, I think.
And I cannot believe that I have to put my faith now in the Republican Party to do the right thing, regulate the plant, the hemp side, and the cannabis THC Delta 9 side, one regulatory body, and create the rules that would make sense as a medicinal tool, as a adult use tool, as a financial, a new means of revenue and tax. And it's a big job. I'm not saying it's not a big job, but it has to get done at some point. And what was a green rush has turned into a green wall, because the elected officials basically legalized the plant in 2018 with the Farm Bill, and they just didn't realize the Pandora's box they were opening. They just had no idea.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, it's I'm kind of given hope by the fact that Germany has been the first in the EU to kind of regulate, adult use or introduce it on, as in a major country. I mean, not to discredit countries like Malta, but
That's what I was going to say. What about little Malta?
Malta's great. I love for Malta. It doesn't have the size, scale, influence, economy as Germany, and rigorous though the approach has been, it's a blueprint for what's done. I think again, this is why I like doing this and talking to people. So they're doing things differently in this country. Well, why is it so different and you have that in, I guess, in individual states, like 5 minutes down the road in New Hampshire is completely different, or Vermont again, and Maine. But it's all kind of, why do we need to keep reinventing the wheel? I get that there are kind of local or, but yeah, exactly. That's what it comes down to, doesn't it? It's like, how okay, if we're going to do this, how much money can I make? Not how much, how much taxation is that?
Correct. And I maintain that the pie is big enough that everybody can have a slice. It just has to be fair. It has to be regulated. It has to be controlled. And that's a huge undertaking. It really is, especially when you've got a country like the United States with 24 states now have got adult use legalization and sales and a market, and another 26 states have it decriminalized and treated it like a medicinal product.
Yes.
But then you've got a state like Alabama that has come and it said, yep, we're going to treat it like a medicinal product, and they cannot figure out how to do it. And it's been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years since the people said we want this. And I mean, I would hate to be dependent on this plant if I was a cancer patient and I couldn't get access to it. If you mentioned epilepsy, autism. I know one of my Michigan correspondents is a mother, Amy Carter. Her son has autism, and she has been using the product since he was 8 years old. And I've seen what he was like when he did not have this product. And I now know him now as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Is a normal kid. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And when I asked a doctor, my first blog, by the way, was in 1937, the wrong drug got prohibited.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I asked a doctor who is a endocannabinoid system specialist, Dr. Ryan Zachlin here in the Boston area, I said, let me ask you a question, Doc. If it wasn't prohibited and it was continued to be studied like it was at the turn of the century, because doctors who went to Penn, Harvard, Yale, and NYU, the oldest medical schools in our country, wrote 5 million prescriptions for cannabis between 1900 and 1906.
Is that right? Wow. Okay.
Okay, that's a great fact. You can use it by all means.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, yeah.
And then after that, it started to get vilified again. As soon as, and that's what then. So and I asked the doctor, I said, would we have as much cancer? And he said, not only we wouldn't have as much cancer, we wouldn't have as much epilepsy, we wouldn't have as much autism. We would be so far ahead of some of those ills that are affecting the next generation of kids. And the parents that are out there, some of the parents that are out there who advocate for their children to get access to this medicine get thrown in jail and are being called unfit parents because of it.
Again, one of the ladies who was one of the mothers driving force behind getting medical cannabis made legal here in the UK, Hannah Deacon, whose son Alfie was severely epileptic, and again, she's recently just had to take a step back from the industry because she's fallen ill. So, there's a lot of people saying, well, we need to support her now because she has, even though she had this kind of single vision to help her own kid, like any parent would,
right,
opened the door for so many other people to make this possible. And it's like, when you think about what can happen just through a single person's effort and how that can benefit the many. It's like, well, the reverse is true as well. The single person can be that blocker as much as, you know, because I don't want it to happen, and I can actually stop that from happening. And then, like you'd say, all of these positive things to come about, but then pharmaceutical companies, allegedly, big pharma, you know, well, what about the treatments that we're charging thousands of dollars for, or the drugs that we're manufacturing that, you know, we can. So again, a lot of people talk about, you know, when's big pharma getting into cannabis, and, you know.
By the way, I think they're already in it.
Yeah.
You just haven't read about it yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably.
They are absolutely funding lobbyists, and they want to look at this plant. And I'll tell you the other one. It's going to be interesting because you got big pharma and you got big alcohol.
And as well as
alcohol, right?
Yeah.
Think about this stat, okay, that came out in the last year. More people in America are using cannabis daily than are drinking alcohol daily.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from a therapeutic standpoint, that makes sense to me. Okay. But you can still drink a beer. You can still have one drink. Okay. And if you happen to be under the influence of cannabis as you walk into the bar or the restaurant that serves, every time you take you're under the influence of cannabis, and every time you go and take a little sip from your beer or your wine or your Mai Tai or whatever you're drinking, it's an 8 times rush.
Yeah.
So you can still control your buzz and the impact it has on you if you know how to medicate properly and know what your body can handle and what it can't. And this is exactly what all of us went through with alcohol in the very beginning when we were experimenting with it as kids. I'm sorry that if you don't recognize that has happened, and the elected officials, what about the kids? And I'm like, it's the parents, not the kids you have to worry about. The parents have to educate themselves before they educate and parent their children and give them the parameters that are set up out of love for their child. So that's called parenting, and it's called growing up, and it's that battle, if you will, against those boundaries. But some of the parents, oh no, it's a drug. We're gonna, not in my house. Well, if I was told as a child not to do something as a rebel, I immediately wanted to do it.
Yeah,
I wanted to know why.
Is the more you police it, the more people just get sneaky about it, and the more they just do it behind your back, and then they more likely get into some sort of bother or freak out or whatever because they don't know what they're doing.
Correct.
And I also appreciate that no self-respecting 16, 17-year-old's going to come to their parents and say, Dad, I'm really interested in cannabis. Can I try some? You know, they're just going to go, well, maybe some might, but again, it's more about figure it out on their own, right?
I happen to know for a fact that has happened in a family that with a guy, we actually mentioned him before we got on the air here. And I love the parenting that he said. He said, I'd rather work with my child on this and explain to them your brain is in development. If you use a product that's going to impact your brain's development, it could have impact on you later in life. And and I've already talked to neurologists about this. In fact, the guy who studies the NFL brains out of Boston University, Dr. Robert Stern, is a guy I know, and he actually lived in the same complex as me. And I was driving by him. I said, I got to ask you a question, Doc. And I know that you're not on the clock. I said, but I'm 65 years old, and all of a sudden I'm like a 15-second delay when and he goes, hey, you're normal. Enjoy it. It's you know, it's part of aging. Can we use other products to build back those brain cells that we've destroyed all through our lives? Sure. There are plenty of things out there that work with the cognitive part of your brain, and that we can all learn from and actually grow from. But in the meantime, it's, you know, we didn't have that knowledge when I was growing up. Right. It's either illegal, or, and if you use it and you get caught with it, you can go to jail. That's why you can't use it. I don't want you to go to jail. And I never wanted to go to jail either, which is why we snuck it into alleyways and behind buildings and around dumpsters. And, you know, that's what we did to not be as obvious about using it as, and as you know, you mentioned it already, it has a very pungent odor.
Yes.
And I happen to like that odor. I hate cigarette odor. And I tolerate cigar odor if it's outdoors on a golf course, but not so much in a cigar lounge, if you will. And now there are products out there. In fact, it was the first thing I said to my bud tender when I got my medical license. I walked into a medical facility in Massachusetts and I said, I'm not sure I want to smoke it anymore. You know, I smoked it a lot. That's how we have used it. That's how everybody thinks you got to use it. And he gave me, you know, a variety of products that were, you know, vaping, edibles, and tinctures, a capsule. And that's how I walked out of my first experience. And of course, now you get to self-medicate. Now you get to check it out. You know, infused honey. I mean, holy mackerel. If you overdo it on infused honey, you are really, really high. Okay.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to be that way. And a lot of people, oh, that's an overdose. And I'm like, well, you know, you took too much, which in theory and in practice, it is an overdose, but actually understanding what dosing you need that you can have and still be human and act accordingly is what we all have to explore. And
well,
now
you say with alcohol, you know, overdosing is basically poisoning ourselves.
Right. And I now have a product that is new to America.
Oh, cool. That
is a measured microdose of 2.5 milligrams of THC that is delivered. I'm going to put it, I think this is my camera. Oh, did you see the spritz?
I did, yeah. Okay.
It's a mist. So it's a mist. And it's a measured microdose of an entry level that is what American Nurses Association believe 2.5 milligrams, start low, go slow.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, a lot of people, it's not going to impact anybody. If you have any history with it, you need 5 or 6 of these spritzes to get to a decent buzz, if you will. But when I walk up to somebody when I do a pop-up in a dispensary in Massachusetts and I have a saline filled device and I walk up to them and I go, so if this was a joint and I passed it to it, would you take a hit on it? He goes, yeah, of course I would. I said, yeah, so would I, except guess what? And then I take the cover off and I give him a spritz and I go, that's a hit from a joint.
Yeah.
And I love the product. The product's
again, this is what I think is going to really start to open things up. And I think about over here, I think in Europe, around having these different form factors. Because governments, you know, have worked hard, you know, as a society to outlaw kind of smoking. People vape like anything nowadays here. You see it everywhere, and it's, you know, arguably less harmful. Do we know the long-term effects of vaping, nicotine source? No, not yet. But again, you know, it's seen as a better alternative. So when talk about these kind of, you know, whether it be like rosin or resin carts and things like that, and I've tried something in the US and they're great, you know, they're just more discreet. I think that's what people want, the buzz, but they just don't want the kind of negative association. And rightly or wrongly, that association is with the smell, the kind of, you know, the kind of having to hide in dark alleyways to either consume or purchase from whoever or whatever it is. And it, you know, again, it needs to kind of be more out in the open, because that's the only way we're going to get that acceptance.
Right. And it's why I talk about, and we've brought up some great topics here about doing something that's against the law. Is that the thing that's going to keep you from doing it? Or are you actually going to jaywalk, not at a sidewalk? You know, like
I've done that in America and I got absolutely bollocked by the police.
Again, you know, it is unlawful. Okay. They're there to protect the public. And there's a reason why you can't jaywalk. But I don't think I've ever met an American who admits that they've never jaywalked. Okay. I mean, come on, people. You know,
I did once in college. I jaywalked once in college, you know.
I didn't inhale.
That's right. Well, that's great. You know, it's great to have you on the show. And really, I mean, we could talk forever. This is the thing. We've got so many great ideas. And again, just tell us where we can catch your shows and where we can find out more about stuff you're doing.
On my YouTube channel, which is Cannabis Media, Cannabis Media, you can find 1,400 videos that I've produced in the last 5 years. All the interviews are there. We've had 1.3 million views of our work. I'm very proud of that. And now that we have a regular news show and 15,000 subscribers to that YouTube channel, and we get a dedicated, qualitative, interested audience in what we're doing, I'm proud of that. We get the 2,500 to 5,000 views a week. Like I said, I've interviewed pretty much everybody in the New England area and the advocates that come out of California. My goal was to connect both coasts.
Right.
When I got my medical card, and I wanted to learn more about. I couldn't understand why the product was called flower when I walked into the display. What the F is flower? You know, it's weed, right? It's herb. It's just you know, I get it. I don't even like to use the M word because to me that has racist connotations to it too. So you know, that's where you can find all of my content, and it's free. And there's you know, we talked about the athletes. My favorite show was produced. Actually, I produced it for Dave Briggs, who's a former sportscaster who now does the Yahoo Business anchoring. He's also worked for CNN and Fox. He worked in sports television here in Boston. He interviewed all of the biggest names in cannabis athletes that are in it, the athletes that have invested in it. I mentioned Calvin Johnson and Gary Pearson, Paul Pearson, Ricky Williams, and Tiki Barber and Amani Toomer were regulars on his show. Right. And all of those, they're my favorite episodes of the, and they're all there talking about openly their use of cannabis while they were NFL, while they were NBA, while they were NHL players. Some of them were under the influence during games that we were watching for our entertainment. Okay. Don't judge these people. I'd rather have them under the influence of cannabis than under the influence of opioids.
100%.
Right. So again, so all of those are on there. It's called The Canversation with Dave Briggs. There's 14 shows. I recommend it. That's one of my favorite shows because I'm a sports guy. And when he called me up and said, I want to interview professional athletes, I go, awesome, because I don't want to. I mean, I could, but I'd rather have you do it because A, I respected him, and B, he just did it because he was interested.
Yeah.
And those shows are there, and they're also now on our free app, which is CM Space TV. When you go to the App Store or Google Play, it's free. That's where our show is posted every Monday morning at 9 a.m. before we live stream it. It's also on the homepage of our website, which is Pro Cannabis Media. I know it because I'm the one who puts it on there. I can't believe I know how to do it, but I do. And that's where the first run and the first publishing and the voice of cannabis with the NCIA is Wednesdays at noon. Now we're going to live stream different episode every week. And we're in it to win it now because this is a national program, and I'm excited about being part of that. So that's where you can kind of see most of my work. And again, we don't charge for our subscriptions yet. I have no money because of that, but I don't do it for the money. I do it because I can, because I have experienced this. I'm a passionate person. I don't like injustice. I want freedom for people. I want them to explore and educate and learn how to use it and consume it responsibly. That's my message. That's why at the end every show, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Consume it responsibly.
That's it. I think that's a great point. But no, thank you so much. And I'll be sure we put some links and we'll go from there. But no, thank you again. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure. And look forward to catching up with you soon.
I enjoyed it, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you.